Alright, hello everyone, and welcome back. I am here today to talk about, well, a bit of an interesting subject. It's rating the currently existing 3D Zelda games, but some of my opinions might be a little bit controversial, but we'll just go right on in, see what comes up, see what you guys think. Alright, so at the bottom of my list is a game that it actually kind of pains me to put at the bottom. So none of these games, I think, are bad. I love The Legend of Zelda. It's like my favorite series of all time. But the game I had to put at the bottom of my list, after struggling to decide where to put it, at the bottom of the list, is Skyward Sword. So, Skyward Sword has a lot of really good positives. Unlike most people, I actually like Fi, I don't know. Spirit of the Sword Girl, I actually really like her. I found her kind of bland humor rather entertaining. I know a lot of people found her kind of annoying and like, oh, just shut up, and constant tutorial. I kind of felt like she was a robot who just constantly stating the obvious. I kind of took that as sort of a funny thing rather than an annoying thing. So, It also has a really good story. The story gives you so much background into this kind of the lore of how Hyrule was found and everything. It had a bit more of an involved story than I think any Zelda game really up until that point, in my opinion. Had also some really good characters. Groose, for example, one of the best characters in like any Zelda game, has some of the greatest enemies. Girahim is weird and creepy, and it's fantastic. But even like Demise kind of looks like he's from a different franchise entirely. Like he's some Final Fantasy boss that suddenly appeared here in Legend of Zelda. It's a little bit weird, but I think it's still pretty cool. So, overall, lots of strong positives. The downsides, however, kind of outweigh the positives in a lot of ways. So, first, I really hate having to revisit areas over and over and over again. I understand that they were trying to do this whole thing where, like, the whole world changes in response to parts of the story, but don't make me then go back and go through all of them again, and it just wasn't fun having to revisit the same areas. There's so few areas. It was kind of annoying. The other thing that I have a complaint with this is the imprisoned one. It's the most irritating boss ever. It's not a fun boss fight, and they make you do it again and again and again, and it's just frustrating, and I don't get why they did that, but they did. Ugh. Anyways, great game still. Bottom of my list of the 3D Zeldas. So the next game on my list is where things start getting a little bit controversial. So I was actually almost tempted to put this one below Skyward Sword, but I just couldn't do it after thinking back on like the imprisoned one and things like that. I was almost tempted to put it at the bottom, but just above Skyward Sword is the Wind Waker. Now, calm down, people. I understand that this is a favorite of the series. For many, I understand this is the best game in a lot of people's mind. Let me explain why it's not. Now, keep in mind my criticisms. I haven't actually played the HD remake on the Wii U or anything like that, so I'm talking about the original. I understand that they did some things to fix the sailing in the remake or remaster. I understand that they polished it up some, but I'm talking about the original. And the sailing in the original is just so bad. It drove me nuts. It's this big, empty world. It's not fun. It's just this big ocean where I just sit there, waiting for my boat to get from one small island to the next small island. The islands, speaking of which, are small. They're not big. They're not super interesting, except for maybe a couple of them. The art style, when it first came out, admittedly bothered me. I was at that perfect age to just, meh, it's not realistic. I need cool graphics. I was in 6th or 7th grade. Okay, fine, I get it. I was stupid back then, I understand. Because in my opinion, the graphics have actually aged very well. They've actually grown on me. I appreciate the style as its own separate thing. I still prefer the more realistic proportions and taking in that cel-shaded look and moving it into things like the art direction in Skyward Sword and in Breath of the Wild. I actually prefer that style, but I can still appreciate Wind Waker for what it was. So in terms of art direction, my opinion has changed on it, but I still just don't like the game. It's just tedious. There's too many parts that I just don't like. Now, there's some good things. Like, I really like the Koroks. The Koroks, I think, are a really interesting race. I think it's really done the Zoras, who are fish people, who have seen live in the oceans in Majora's Mask, then evolve into bird people. I think that's silly, but with that said, the Rito are still actually a cool race. I just think it's dumb that they're evolved from Zoras. It has some fun characters, but it does a couple things wrong. The ocean, can't stand it. Small islands makes it to where I don't feel really interested in exploring them. I don't like how they took Tetra and then made her boring the second they turned her into Princess Zelda. I was really interested in seeing the idea of seeing this new Zelda actually like be proactive and stuff, and it didn't really happen. Tetra was super cool, and then they took it away from her. So here's the thing that I know a lot of people like that I really can't stand. When you're in Ganon's fortress and they take away all your stuff and you're doing the sneaky section, that does not work in Zelda games. I have never liked any Zelda sneak section ever. And that can be overshadowed by lots of greatness, but sneaky portions, not good. Not good in Zelda games, in my opinion. Just don't like them. Meh. But, you know, I still want to give this game credit. It had some interesting moments, interesting ideas, and its lows aren't quite as low as Skyward Sword, so that's why this puts it just above it. So, for my next controversial pick, Majora's Mask. So, I do really like Majora's Mask. I think it's great. I had tons of fun just rolling around as a Goron, just goofing off, swimming as a Zora through the seas. You know, it's a great, fun game. It's fantastic. I think that it's a big step up from the other two on this list. I love the dark tone. I love the interesting characters. I love the interesting world, the side quests. Just so much about it. I love lots about this game. It's fantastic. It's wonderful. But the time mechanic, I'm one of those people who just can't stand it. I hate having to, like, there are some cool aspects to it, but I hate having to go back and redo parts of the dungeons and refight the bosses and have to keep track of... It's irritating to remember what I have to do. It's cool, it's used well in a lot of ways. I just think they could have padded the time a little bit more, made it a little bit more lenient. Once again, I haven't played the remaster, I've only played the original, so I am somewhat limited on that front. I know that they made some changes in the remaster for the 3DS. I know some of them weren't for the best. Like, I know a lot of people complained about the Zora swimming mechanics and things like that, but I also know that they made keeping track of the side quests and time stuff easier, which might have solved some of my problems with the time mechanic. So it might have gotten a few extra points on the list if I had played the remaster, but based on the original release, I think it's a fantastic game. Some of the best bosses, in my opinion. It has some of the most fun mechanics with the masks, especially the transformation masks. Those are probably the highlight of any Zelda game for me in actuality. But like I said, the time mechanic is such a core mechanic that me not meshing with it well just really drags down the whole experience. I'm just not a fan of time mechanics in general. Even in another one of my favorite series, Pikmin, same reason I prefer Pikmin 2 over Pikmin 1. I still love Pikmin 1, but the time mechanic gets on my nerves. I just like to be able to do what I want and not have to stress about the time. I just want to have fun. So time mechanics, gets in the way of otherwise a truly fantastic game, in my opinion. Now, the next game on my list, I very, very much like. I know some people would probably be a little weird that I put it this high up on the list, but the next game is Twilight Princess. Now, with Twilight Princess, I have actually played the HD remake on the Wii U, so I can talk about that a little bit, but realistically, it doesn't change very much in anything that affects my opinion of the game. So basically, mostly I'm going to be just talking about the originals. The only thing that, it adds a little bit more kind of end game playability in the remake, or in the remaster, but nothing too significant. Now, I like Twilight Princess a lot. I can acknowledge some of its flaws. The graphics haven't aged nearly as well as something like Wind Waker has. It isn't necessarily the most original of the games, considering a lot of it follows the same lines as things like Ocarina of Time, but I just feel like it's the Zelda game that I like that's been refined. You have this grand adventure, lots of races, huge world to explore, interesting locales, you have great characters, you have interesting enemies, you have fun items, unique dungeon ideas. It's really good. It has, in my opinion, probably the best side character in any game, which is Midna. Midna is so good. She's just a fantastic character. With that said, one unfortunate thing is they tie Midna to a mechanic that I don't like, which is Wolf Link. I don't find Wolf Link fun. None of the stuff with Wolf Link is fun. Finding the bugs isn't fun. I get that it's meant to help you explore the map and kind of get used to what you're doing. I understand how the combat works, how they had to kind of simplify it some and have him hold this homing attack where he like jumps between everyone. I don't know. I didn't enjoy any of the Wolf Link stuff, really. So, not really my thing there, but the rest of the game is fantastic. I do enjoy the Twilight Realm idea. I enjoy the weird alternate aesthetics. I enjoy a lot of that. I enjoy the enemies. I enjoy Zant until they reveal he's just a weird, crazy chicken man. That was weird. He was so intimidating when he still had his mask on and stuff like that. He was great. And then his personality totally switched. I kind of get that they're trying to show that he's like unhinged and whatever. Like, I didn't like that. I didn't like that reveal of Zant though. But I enjoy the Twilight. I enjoy all of that. I enjoy the enemies. I enjoy it all. It's fantastic. I enjoy the world. At the time, the graphics were fantastic. I still like the character design direction. It just hasn't aged as well, which is usually what happens with more like quote-unquote realistic graphics, but I don't know. It's still good. Still one of my top Zelda games, and that's saying something concerning Zelda is probably my favorite, or at the very least, one of my absolute favorite franchises of all time. Okay. So, getting to the top of the list really makes this hard on me now. I can't... It's just so hard to decide between the top games of my favorite franchise. It's so difficult, but I think the next spot I'm going to have to give to Ocarina of Time. So I've played... So to give some context here, there is huge nostalgia goggles on me right now. They're just right there. It was my first like real video game that I played by myself on the N64. Like I had played some games on like the original NES, like the original Super Mario Bros. And like Duck Hunt and things like that. I had kind of goofed around in a few other games like Mario 64. So I had done all those kinds of things, but the first game that I really like sat down and played and what really got me into gaming was Ocarina of Time. So I'm always going to have huge, just gigantic nostalgia goggles for it. With that said, I still think it's a great game, including the Master Quest Edition, which is just a fun diversion. I'm not really going to get into it, but it's a fun little thing if you have a chance to pick it up. So Ocarina of Time. It's a lot of the things I was saying about Twilight Princess. I think Twilight Princess is overall a more refined version of Ocarina of Time, but I think Ocarina of Time has a bit more, spirit to it, more originality. I know that sounds weird talking about a game that in a lot of ways has just kind of ripped off all of the 2D Zelda games and then put it into a 3D game, but we have to keep in mind, it was the first 3D Zelda game. It was the one that started it all. It was a huge transition. It was one of the earliest 3D games in general, and it really revolutionized what you could do with 3D games. So you had things like the lock-on, the Z targeting. You had this whole way of navigating through the 3D space. It was insane. It was great. It was fantastic. It looked wonderful for the time. It hasn't aged great, but looked great at the time. Had this sense of grand scale. It had that whole thing that if you hadn't experienced in previous Zelda games, it was one of those moments where you're like, haha, look, I collected the 3 stones from the 3 spirit stones from the 3 dungeons. I'm going to beat the game. Oh, what? That's literally just the introduction to the game? What a twist. It was it was just a great feeling. It still has some of the best songs. Yes, I know a lot of the songs are from previous Zelda games. Those songs are great too, but it also has some original ones, which are also fantastic. It was just so much fun. It was something that you hadn't experienced at the time, and even to this day, if you go back and play it, people who haven't played it before, it can still be a fun, really good adventure game, and that's saying something for a game that's that old. It's aged wonderfully, but because of the fact that it is held back by some of the limitations of how old it is, I just couldn't put it above the next game on my list. The next game on my list is Breath of the Wild. Now, everyone has said so much about this game. They've praised it. Some people have criticized it, but mostly there's been unanimous praise about it. I'm sure there's some people who are going, yeah, but can you put it at the number 1 spot on this list? I think so. I think that this is the best 3D Zelda game that has ever existed. It's so good. There's flaws to it. It's not as perfect and refined as some of the others, but just as an experience as a whole, it's so good. It's just so good. The open air concept, being able to climb anywhere, glide around, it's just so freeing. You get to really feel like you're exploring every little nook and cranny that you explore. There's something there to reward you. There's never a moment where you, oh, I bet there's something up there, and you climb up there and then, never mind, nothing, disappointment. There's never a moment of that. You will always find something that rewards you for exploring, and it's wonderful. It's a great feeling. It just makes every moment of gameplay fun. The graphics are wonderful. I think this is the epitome of that cel-shaded look that they started with Wind Waker, modified and made better in Skyward Sword. This is the perfected version of it, and it's wonderful. It's great to look at. The challenge is great. I personally also really liked the weapon durability mechanic. It made it to where once I got past this mental hurdle of I want to save all my weapons, once I got past that, it made it so much fun to just experiment with new weapon types against different enemies, and I get to use all these cool weapons instead of like holding them for the endgame boss, but then never even using them, like literally ever, like I do in every other RPG game, just ever. So that was a lot of fun. Different outfits, you can, not only for different abilities and things like that, but also just for fashion's sake. Like, it's fun to just dress up in different costumes and things like that. The divine beasts aren't the greatest. I kind of prefer more traditional dungeons, but they worked. The shrines were a ton of fun. I think there's too many of them, and I kind of think that they took away from the traditional dungeon experience. I liked it a bit more focused but larger scale dungeons, whereas this one had a lot of really small, just kind of mini puzzles. But that's still fun. It's a good way of exploring the world and coming across these little things. It's great. It's a fantastic game. I'm really looking forward to the sequel that they announced. I can't wait to see how that goes and what happens, and I hope that they make the story more coherent in this one, because the story in Breath of the Wild is really interesting and fantastic, but it's not clearly portrayed, but it's not done so in that interesting, not clearly explained way, the way that like the Dark Souls series does, where it's hidden in item description and everything like that. It feels incomplete instead. Like, it doesn't feel like they were trying to be like mysterious, or it just feels like the story was kind of incomplete. But what was there was really good. I found most of the characters really interesting. Some of the modern champions, descendants, specifically the Goron, not my favorite character. But that doesn't take away, like I said, from the experience as a whole. While it's not the most refined Zelda game, it's still the best experience in my opinion. But wait. You probably think that I've just talked about all the 3D Zelda games. But there's actually one more. And while Breath of the Wild isn't the most refined, perfect Zelda experience, this next game is. It is truly the epitome of what Zelda games could ever become. Link's Crossbow Training. Yes, this game is a true masterpiece. It's wonderful. Okay, I'm kidding. Breath of the Wild's still better. But this is actually a fun little spin-off game.